Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about Margot Robbie. Apologies, I've got very little pink in my wardrobe, so all I've got is a kind of a pale faux pink t-shirt here to honor the theme of Barbie, which is breaking box office records as we speak. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about the horoscope of Margot Robbie, of course, through the lens of Jyotish or Vedic astrology. Now, on first sight of her horoscope, I saw something that every astrologer hates to see, which was an ascendant in the very first degree of a sign. For her, that was Cancer. And looking at the horoscope, I thought, that doesn't really sing to me. But I noticed that I could tweak it just by, well, her official birth time is 7:45 in the morning. I tweaked that backwards earlier by just 4 minutes to get a Gemini rising, very late Gemini rising, needless to say. And lo and behold, suddenly it all makes sense. So I'm not going to go through my whole rationale of why or how I tweaked that birth time. I have several techniques at my disposal, but maybe another video I'll get into discussing some of those. Be that as it may, I'm putting my stake in the sand for this, and instead of a 7:45 a.m. birth time, I'm now using 7:41. Now, Margot Robbie, I mean, really, not just a good-looking blonde. I believe this woman is really quite smart and talented as well too. And I'll explain the rationale for some of my my thinking in accepting this Gemini ascendant horoscope for her. Anyway, so let's have a look at that horoscope and get to those details. Okay, so first I wanted to show you what the horoscope looked like before I rectified it. So with 7:45 as a birth time, she would have had like the first, let me see, it was barely 1 minute of arc into Cancer. We hate to see that. So, in my experience, recorded birth times are always a little bit later than actual birth time. So almost always the birth time, the true birth has occurred somewhat earlier than has been indicated, especially if it's rounded off to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever. Anyway, so this was the horoscope with a 7:45 birth time, and it would have been 1 minute of arc into Cancer, just barely. So even a minute earlier could have got her back into Gemini. So when I looked at this, Cancer rising, fourth lord, moon fairly bright in the fourth house, but that's not remarkable. And then in terms of yogas, I'm not going to go through what's there and what's not there. As I say, this horoscope just didn't sing to me. And so I tweaked it 4 minutes earlier. 1 minute, as I say, could have sufficed, but for other reasons that I won't go into now, I went a bit earlier. And then I ended up with a Gemini rising, which is this. Now, instantly, we have a whole lot of stuff going on here. So scan the Kendras, and the first thing you see is Mercury in its own sign in the first house. This forms one of the Pancha Mahapurusha yogas, Bhadra yoga specifically, with Mercury in its own sign in a Kendra. So, that's quite strong. And occurring in the first house, it gives personality, appearance, charisma. Think Arnold Schwarzenegger, for instance, who has the same configuration. And think also of Schwarzenegger, too, who went on to parlay his bodybuilding career into a highly successful real estate career in LA. Now, I think Margot Robbie's got significant smarts as well. And of course, this goes with the territory. Mercury is, a Vaishya Graha. And such a person can have strong skills in the business environment as well, negotiating, deal making, etc., etc. Street smarts, you might say. We can find some, justification for that further by saying, well, Sun and Mercury are a valid Buddha Ditya yoga forming in the first, and furthermore, this Mercury is strong. But that's, in hindsight of very recent events. If we go back a little further into her history, as young as 8 years old, she was a bit of a gymnastics star in the day. So you look at this third house lord. Third house is, physical skills and abilities, and turns up a lot is significant in the horoscopes of performers and actors and athletes. So Sun, Lord of the third, is in the first. And where it joins with the ascendant Lord Mercury. So that's part of that. I mean, she, has done many of the stunts in her own movies. For some of her roles, she's learned how to box and kickbox. She's learned how to, hold her breath underwater for 5 minutes. I mean, this is a lot of physical self-control and mastery of the body, which, of course, every performer needs to some degree. So this is just the beginning of it. I mean, she's got multiple yogas going on here. Because Mercury and Jupiter, who are both Kendra lords, their combination forms two what we call Dharma-Karma Adipati yogas, where Lord of the first Mercury joins with Lord of the seventh Jupiter and Lord of the 10th Jupiter. Those are two separate yogas. So that's power there as well. She has the semblance of a Saraswati yoga. It's not perfectly formed, but notice that all the three benefics, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, are all strong. Now, Mercury is, Swarashi in its own sign. Also has Digbala in the first. Jupiter has Digbala in the first. Venus is also in its own sign. Venus is a little bit of a spoiler because it's in the 12th house. But sometimes two of these grahas out of three can carry the day, so long as the third one is not miserable. And so this is a bit more of the spirit of the ruling rather than the literal dictation of the rule for Saraswati. But anyway, what does Saraswati give? A love of education, knowledge, intelligence, good judgment, all these things that we would expect both of the rational Mercury and the, dharmically inclined Jupiter. She has another kind of, education intelligence yoga called Kalanidhi, which is when, again, if all three of these are dignified, but particularly Jupiter, if it's in the sign of Mercury or the sign of Venus and in a Kendra, that qualifies as well too. So there's multiple things going on for her here that, indicate significant strength. As a young woman of, sort of high school era, she was very hardworking. She carried on 3 jobs at the same time. Saturn in the 7th house, aspecting the first and the first lord, is some significance, with respect to her hard work ethic and organizational skills, we might add as well too. This Saturn is strong for 2 reasons. It's in its retrogression cycle, therefore brighter than normal. That's why we regard retrograde planet as being strong. Furthermore, Saturn in the 7th house gets Digbala, so that's also good. Mars as well gets Digbala in the 10th house. Now, going back to her athleticism and her willingness to, put her body through all these things, first as a young girl, being naturally inclined towards athletics, but then also in her adult roles in movies, taking on these, arduous challenges of, physical performance. Mars in the 10th, of course, aspects the first house, and it aspects the first Lord Mercury as well too. So, this gives quite a bit of impetus to this whole notion of strength and, strong-mindedness as well, too. Mars, both Sun and Mars are Kshatriya planets, basically the ruling class. In the old days, that would be the king and his ministers and generals and police. And, in modern times, it's CEOs and directors and project managers, etc., etc. That's the commonality for those 2 grahas in Kendras. And that gives her, organizational skills and command and control kind of bias in life. And I think we're only just beginning to see the strength of her talents. I had, only seen a couple of her movies, in the past few years, Suicide Squad and something else that I don't remember right now, some sort of a caper thriller. But behind the scenes, I mean, this woman is really pretty smart. She bought the rights to the Barbie, franchise in terms of being able to make a movie back in 2018. That's 5 years ago. And she found the writer to write the script. And, the results of Barbie, I mean, the Mattel group is just glowing with pleasure because of how successful this movie has become. And, I think most of the credit, belongs to her. This, exhibits quite a lot of foresight and intelligence and, you could say, street smarts, along with the considerable talent that she exhibits. If you do, career analysis, which basically involves a kind of Sudarshan technique where you look and see what planet has the greatest influence on the Udaya Lagna, that's the natural, ascendant of the eastern horizon, and co-equally has what graha influences the Chandra Lagna and its lord, and what graha influences Surya Lagna and its lord. So we can use the natural ascendant, we can treat the moon as an ascendant, we can treat the sun as an ascendant, and we look at the influence of planets on each one of those and their dispositors. And it turns out that Mercury is by far the most powerful planet in terms of influencing those three lagnas. So then we're back to Mercury again, which forms, Pancha Mahapurush Yoga. Along with two, Dharma-Karma Adipati yogas and Buddha-Ditya yoga, and is participatory to, sort of a semblance of a Saraswati yoga, and is supportive also of a Kalanidhi yoga. Wow, there's a whole lot going on here with Mercury. And so I believe that, she is, we're just beginning to see what Margot Robbie can do. And I think she's going to be a great inspiration for women in Hollywood in the years to come. Part of the validation of any rectification is looking to see, what happened in the dashas of the planets once you, reorient them. Well, here's an interesting thing. In June of 2008, this was when she had just entered her Jupiter dasha. Within weeks of that occurrence, now, this is sort of coincidental. We shouldn't expect that events, happen so fast upon the heels of a dasha transition, but it did for her. She got accepted to play a role in a Australian soap opera called Neighbours. And that was really the launch of her career. It was in Jupiter Dasha, needless to say, Jupiter Bhukti as well. Now, this Jupiter participates in many yogas, as I've already said, a couple of Dharma-Karma Adipati yogas, of course, involving Jupiter as the 10th Lord. So that got her started. And then, her first real breakout movie was Wolf of Wall Street. That happened in Jupiter Mercury, possibly Jupiter K2, but I think Jupiter Mercury. And again, Mercury gets invoked as a Bhukti Lord and participates in so many yogas. Suicide Squad came out during Jupiter Venus. Venus is the Lord of her 5th and the Lord of the 12th and occupies the 12th. She also got married right around that same time. So, Venus is Lord of the 5th, the fulfillment of romance. And, we often expect the 7th Lord to be involved in a period where marriage occurs. And yes, Jupiter was involved as the Dasha Lord, but Venus was involved as a Bhukti Lord. And, some of Shastra, the classical texts say that marriage can occur during periods of the 12th house lord or occupant. Why the 12th house? Well, because in the old days, you didn't have sex until you got married. And so the 12th house, indicating pleasures of the bed, would unlock that door and make that whole experience available. So it still applies today, even though, we're all much more promiscuous than in the era of our grandparents. Then along came 2018. She was running Jupiter Moon. And this is when she made the very prescient decision to acquire the movie rights for Barbie from the Mattel Group. So Moon, at the time that it was running, let's see, Moon is in Rahu Nakshatra. I'm not going to draw any specific conclusions from that, except that Rahu gives the results of Saturn, its Rashi Lord, and there in the 7th house implies some sort of deal making or partnership or whatever. But Moon in the 5th house, I don't need to go too far with this, Moon Bhukti, can indicate that creative leap of faith, a speculation, if you like, which the 5th house also rules. And the Moon is the Lord of the 2nd, so it involved paying out some money as well too to buy those rights. But really a very, very smart move back in 2018. And then in 2019, she began to function as a producer, perhaps with the rights for Barbie in hand, and I believe other projects that she was also pitching. Her starting to wear the producer hat occurred during Jupiter Dasha, and she's still in Jupiter Dasha. Oh wait, no, maybe she's just transitioned. I believe she has just transitioned into Saturn Dasha. But anyway, when she started as a producer, Jupiter Mars was the period. Now Mars, why? Well, Mars is the occupant of the 10th house. Remember, I said Mars is, along with the Sun, is a Kshatriya planet. This is the command and control inclination. What does a producer do? A producer is like a general on the battlefield who has to marshal all these resources of finances and talent and various creative endeavors and every other kind of thing that gets involved in movie production. It's a substantive role, and it takes a firm will and a vision and a lot of organizational capacity, pushing through all kinds of problems and resistance. And I believe that she really has this, and we're going to see more and more of this. So basically, she has just gone into her Saturn Dasha the week of, a year ago, July 22, she went into Saturn Dasha. And so what will happen going forward? Well, let's wait and see. I'm not going to venture into that right now, but I do believe that this will perpetuate her current success because Saturn is well placed. It enjoys double strength in the 7th house, retrograde and Digbala, and it is supported by one very strong benefic, Mercury, and a substantial benefic, Jupiter, as well too. So Saturn is very well stabilized, and going forward, I think we're just beginning to see, her deal-making potential. Okay, so just to recap, I mean, this was, I hope, some illustration of the value of rectification. If you'd like to go through Margot Robbie's chart using the original Cancer Ascendant, feel free and see what you can construe from that, in terms of yogas, which generate power for the individual. And then also vis-a-vis the timeline that will be consequential to that, with the Dasha Bhukti sequence. I believe, the circumstances, in her life, defend the choice that I've made here by tweaking her birth time at least 1 minute earlier, and for my own reasons, 4 minutes earlier than that which was declared. And this is something I think all of us as astrologers need to keep our eye on when a horoscope shows only 1 degree rising. We really have to entertain the possibility of birth might have been earlier. Anyway, be that as it may, I just wanted to bring up a couple of other points which I neglected to do in my main discussion. Over the course of her, acting career, Margot Robbie has proved herself to be quite the linguist, and she's received kudos for some of her language skills. In one movie, she had to, adopt a Brooklyn accent, which she fulfilled admirably, and people were quite amazed that she was not a native New Yorker. In another movie, she, spoke in Appalachian, which is, no mean feat in itself. For the movie about the, figure skating star Tonya Harding, she, emulated a Pacific Northwest accent. I'm not familiar with that, but apparently, that takes some doing as well too. So, she's quite good with language. For evidence of that in the chart, just look at the second house, which implies something of verbal skills. So, the Lord Moon has gone to a good place in the fifth house, which can parlay into, the acting potential and linguistic skills aspected by Mars from the 10th. But maybe, the other clue lies in the Rahu Ketu axis running through the second and the eighth houses. And when the nodal axis runs through the second house, we get an inkling of foreign language as being a potential, skill set for the individual. Now, the examples that I gave, Brooklynese, Appalachian, and Pacific Northwest are not foreign accents. But, for anyone like me who's had to watch, some, British mystery with people in the Northern Highlands of Scotland speaking their English, and yet I need to have the subtitles on to understand what's being said. Some accents are almost like a foreign language. Anyway, so she has done an admirable job of that. And again, I think this also speaks indirectly to her verbal persuasive skills as well too, and probably strengthens her hand in terms of negotiations when it comes down to deal making. Anyway, Margot Robbie, I had no idea until I looked at her horoscope, but boy, I'm going to keep my eye on her. I hope you will too. Okay, enough for today. See you another time. Bye.